Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where people truly believe that the world revolves around them and nobody matters. And in this episode, holy moly, guys, we've got Karens trying to ruin funerals, destroying people's cars, freeloading family members. It's gonna be a wild one. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories. Don't shake your heads too hard, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. So this is hard for me to share, but I messed up and ruined my marriage. Now, I'm not looking for pity or understanding here. I know I'm not getting it. Me and my ex-wife have a 14-month-old son. After he was born, our marriage just fell apart. She said I wasn't pulling my weight with childcare and chores, but at the same time, she expected me to know what to do without telling me. It was bad. We argued a lot, and I ended up telling her that life would be so much harder without me, that she needs me in her life. She got really quiet, and I thought that was the end of the argument. Well, that made things fall apart, and we're getting divorced. We're living separately, and we each got a new apartment. As for our son, the law in our state, Kentucky, is that 50-50 is the default for custody. It's automatic, unless one parent proves neglect on the part of the other. We don't have that, so on the advice of both of our lawyers, we're splitting time, and we're doing alternating weeks since we're separated. We usually switch on Mondays with the daycare pickup and drop-off. I knew being a single parent wasn't easy, but I didn't really know until now. This is where I realized how badly I messed up because I'm drowning. The weeks I have my son, I don't get anything done, and I can barely even function at work because I'm so exhausted. I spend the whole week I don't have him catching up, and I can't even get everything done. My apartment's a mess, and I can hardly keep up with errands and chores. It sucks. I realized I messed up because I thought since I was having a hard time, my wife would be too, and we could call off the divorce and work on things. But she doesn't want to. She says her life is easier without me being around, as I rarely do chores, I create more headaches for her, and she's the opposite of me, and can apparently keep up everything fine. She says she isn't exhausted anymore, and realized that it's easier having one person to take care of instead of two. I know I messed up, and should have been a better husband. I can't even ask for less time with my son because I can't afford the child support. Right now, neither of us has any because of 50-50 and equal income. But if we go off 50-50, my lawyer says the person with less time will get child support. I hate myself for effing up so much. Like, what did I do? Any help would be appreciated. Yeah, all I can say is I think OP effed up pretty badly, and there's no amount of, hey, you should say this or that to your wife will fix things. It totally sounds like she has her mind made up, and she's right. It's much easier to take care of one child than two, especially when the bigger one just creates more mess and doesn't help around the house, like common sense, right? And honestly, to me, it only seems like OP wants to call off the divorce, not because he still loves his wife or wants to be a family, but it's to make his life easier, which is super entitled. Like, he wants to what? Get back together with her so she can pull 100% of the weight while he does whatever he wants and have more spending money? Guys, let me know what you think. Is there a chance that OP could save this relationship? So, some of my relatives moved to the US a few months ago. My parents let one of the families, my Uncle Ben, Aunt May, and two of my cousins, Mary and Stacy, live with them. My parents live in a very nice, walkable city. Their apartment's in a great location, close to public transit but in a quiet area. Unfortunately, it's also very expensive. My parents' apartment would easily cost like $4,500 to $5,000 a month to rent where they live. So despite it being a tight living situation, it was really the only option currently for the relatives who just moved. They basically had no money, no credit, and their jobs would for now be limited to minimum wage jobs. We fronted the cost of their immigration fees, got them phones, found my cousin's English classes at a public library 5 minutes away from my parents, and got them jobs that's about 1.5 miles from the house, maybe a 10 to 15 minute bus ride. My parents found my uncle a job at a small shop, slightly further away, but less than 2 miles. However, he couldn't get past the training. My parents continued to find him jobs, but he was taking more time than expected. My Aunt May refused to work. After a few months, my parents approached my aunt and uncle about them chipping in for groceries and utilities, since the two cousins had been working for a couple of months at this point. My parents went from having 2 people and a cat to now having 6 people and a cat to house, and a whole house to feed. My dad went from getting groceries 1 to 2 times a month to having to go every week, sometimes 2 times a week. My parents aren't well off either. They live a frugal lifestyle, and my dad was fortunate to buy the apartment they live in a long time ago, or else we would have been priced out a long time ago. But apparently asking for grocery money was too much of an ask. so they said they'll move out. That's completely fine, since nobody was forcing them to stay, and it wasn't doing my parents any favors. The whole time my relatives lived with my parents, my aunt and uncle would constantly mention that they had other family and friends in other parts of the states that would help them out. So my dad said, fine, if that's what you want to do, then move out, since you don't want to pay us anything, and you have all these other people that can help you. So pretty much a week after the conversation about chipping in, they had someone from my aunt's side of the family fly in from Michigan, and then drive them 13 hours from where we are to Michigan. I guess my relatives were correct in having other people that can help them. Before they moved, I suggested my aunt and uncle go to Michigan first and see how it is before making such a big change, but he refused. We even found places in New Jersey where the cost of living was lower, and they could have jobs and still be close enough to all of our family for visits, but they refused. Once they moved to Michigan, they quickly realized that help there is more limited than what they had here, and it's not quite as nice over there. My uncle kept talking about factory jobs he could do out in Michigan, and he got one. However, it's not quite as cushy as he was imagining, since he's got to get up at 5 in the morning and work all the way to 5 p.m. The area itself is not as nice, and my cousins don't feel safe walking around. There's no good way for them to get around without a car, which they don't have. And they're being nickel and dimed for everything that their friends over there are helping them with. Not quite the same situation they had while living with my parents. They lasted about 3 weeks. That's when my uncle called us back, and it's all complaints. How tough the work is, how his blood pressure's high, how my aunt can't sleep with the stress about money, and they want to move back into our apartment to live with us again. We've just said that hopefully things will get better, because what else are we supposed to say? At this point, my parents have stopped answering calls because it'll just be complaints and whining how they just want to live with us again. Yeah, thank goodness OP's parents stopped answering the calls, because sometimes you really have to put your foot down when it comes to family, especially the freeloading ones that expect everything without giving anything in return. And all I can say is it serves them right. I love how taking advantage of family is not working out how they expected. I remember this super vividly. Lots of tears were shed this day, as my family had lost our matriarch, my great-grandmother of 104. The family was torn to shreds, so nonsense like this wasn't expected. Here's a little backstory. My dad's family is full of many different ethnic groups. My aunts and uncles lived all over the world, so they've married accordingly. However, this one aunt and uncle, whom I haven't seen in decades, figured their emotions were more important than that of my own. I've always been close to my grandparents on my dad's side, and that hasn't changed, even when my mom and dad divorced and I moved to Texas. We've gone through a ton of losses since I was little. My great-grandmother as of late, my dad's mom, and my gramps, who I wasn't old enough to remember. I've had my fair share of funerals, and if it wasn't seen as disrespectful, I would rather mourn in secret. With that said, every funeral I've gone to, my father's always saved me a seat in the front pews near him, so that I'm not lost in the sea that's my dad's side of the family. This funeral was the worst of these. Knowing his parents and now grandparents were both gone, my dad was sputtering and bawling, and he would just not stop. But that's jumping a bit too far, so let's take it back to when everyone was filing into the chapel. I naturally took my spot next to my father in the first row of pews, preparing for tons of tears. It was a really sad day. I was taking a moment to myself to breathe, calm myself down, and that's when my Aunt Karen, whom I haven't seen in over 10 years, walks up to me with her son. I stand to give them a hug and some blessings as normal, and then go sit down. Suddenly though, my Aunt Karen grabs my arm and she holds me in suspension. Her nails are cutting into me a bit, but I don't say very much about it. She then says to me, excuse me, where do you think you're going? Indirect family, sit toward the back. Hearing that, I was appalled. Multiple scenarios of me hanging at my great-grandmother's house and playing with Legos until Dad came home from work start filling my mind, and that's when I cleared my throat. I say to her, I'm sorry, I don't think I understand. I'm great-grandma's first generation of great-grandbabies. I can sit here, same as my dad, her grandbaby. And I don't think. She then scoffs and says, I don't see your name on it, kid, so move out of the way. Don't you know how to respect your elders? Don't you dare do this at a funeral. This is not the time and place, so move to the back. I've known Big Granny for years, and you've never been around. There's no way someone like you was reserved a seat here. I doubt she even remembers you. I'm nearly to tears at this point. I couldn't believe this was happening right now. Not only did I feel insulted, she tried to tack on some guilt to make me feel even worse. That's when I look over, and they're carrying Great Granny in, preparing to start. I begin to whisper, fighting the tears of confrontation, as well as seeing Great Granny's coffin. I then say to her, I'm sure that Granny wouldn't want someone doing this to another person at a funeral. It's time to be respectful. Her son tries to say move it to me, but Karen gives the back of his head a small smack and says, hush up, stay out of grown folks' conversation. She then turns to me and says, he's right, we've been here more, so these are our seats. Move it. That's when my dad, turning from talking to other people to tune in, stands up, his light-skinned face turning beet red in anger. And he says, hey, you need to go to the back. We were here first. This is no time to be disrespectful and do this. That's when Karen says, excuse me? I have as much right to be here with my son to honor our great-grandmother as much as she does. But my dad wasn't having it. He says, get out. Karen replies, what? My dad tells her, leave the chapel, go away. If you're here to do this and pick and choose seats, thinking you're more important than others, you need to leave, now. His outburst brought a ton of attention, and I was nearly to tears. Karen and her son are beet red and bawling at this point, making a huge scene. She was scream-crying, trying to draw as much attention to herself as possible. I didn't see them after that. The funeral service was amazing. It wasn't depressing. The pastor made some nice points, some good laughs, and brought back some really fond memories. Man, some people have no sense whatsoever, guys. Like, I'm just so shocked that the Karen told OP that this wasn't a time and place to argue her and to just let her have their seats, when it was definitely not a time and place to do what she did. Like, no one should have to deal with entitled people at a funeral, especially when you've lost someone you deeply care about. And honestly, in my opinion, it sounds like all the Karen cared about was being seen in the front crying, drawing attention to herself, than truly paying her respects. So I didn't think I would ever encounter one in the wild, but oh boy do I have a story for you. So me and my girlfriend are driving to work at around 7:30. We share one car. We're exhausted and have no idea what kind of extremely entitled bitchery is about to go down. So we're stopped at a red light for a couple of minutes when out of nowhere, slam, we're hit from behind. The light's still red, by the way. Luckily, we were at the front of the line, so we weren't pushed into another car, but the collision was hard enough to give us both whiplash. I look back at the person that hit us, and of course, she has a phone in her hand. I can only assume that this was the cause of the accident, as she wouldn't admit she was looking at her phone. Now, all of this is really unfortunate, but it doesn't really constitute entitled bitchery. That part comes next. So the first thing she says as she gets out of the car flying towards us is, "Can we make this quick? You're gonna make me late for work." There was no apology whatsoever, not a shred of concern or guilt in her tone. And I'm thinking, wow, lady, you think we're out driving around at 7:30 on a weekday to get fresh air? You are making us late for work. That's what I wanted to say, but I wasn't ready to be confrontational yet, as I wasn't even fully awake, and I had not realized the magnitude of this lady's bitchiosity. So I just asked to exchange information, and we start taking pictures of our wrecked bumper. She then hits me with this gem. She says, "You know, there's actually no proof that I caused that damage." And this is where I lost it. I'm generally a very calm person, but when someone gives me a perfectly justified opportunity to lose my lid, you'd better believe I'm gonna take advantage. I take it from 0 to 100 instantly and say, "Are you serious? Real effing classy. Yeah, there's no proof except the whiplash in our necks that we have every right to sue you over, and maybe the paint from your car that's now smeared all over our bumper that I'm now getting a video of." Hearing that, the woman's completely unfazed. Her only response is, "You should know that I work with cops. If you even..." And I'm thinking, holy, this Karen is so effing entitled that she thinks she can intimidate me with the fact that she works with cops or something. I say to her, yes, and I work with monkeys. These facts are equally irrelevant to the situation. Now, I actually don't work with monkeys, but I thought it was funny in the moment. In retrospect, I wish I had a better comeback to this flagrant bitchery. The woman continues to drop the fact that she works with cops as we force her to give us information and then get out of there. Her insurance paid for the damage, but not before she called me one last time and lost it on me. Of course, she tried once more to intimidate me with the fact that cops exist and that she's friends with the police, and I immediately hang up. Maybe I should have tried to get her fired for using her proximity to police as a threat, but I was done interacting with this woman. Weeks later, after my car was fixed, I saw her around the neighborhood, and I just shot her a giant smile and waved. She did not wave back. Guys, I have a feeling that this is probably not her first time getting into an accident like this. And the fact that she was so unfazed about it, and she's just like, let's get this over with, I'm late, really cements the fact that she knew she was in the wrong. And seriously guys, that monkey response was great though. But if that were me and she tried to intimidate me with cops, I would have said to her, hey, you work with cops? Great. Can you please call one of them? That'll save us both some time. And honestly, I'm betting she had no relation to the cops at all. So I'm 16 years old, and my mom is a teacher at our school. Our school has a special elective you can take, which is being a teacher's aide during your elective period. It's mostly stuff like grading papers for them, making copies, mentoring, etc. It's pretty much always just the teacher's favorite student at the time. I found out at the beginning of the semester that my mom chose a guy named Dave. Now, the thing about Dave is he's made my life a living nightmare since middle school. He's picked on me mercilessly, both physically and emotionally, since 6th grade. I don't want to get into everything he's done to me, but everyone's fully aware of it, including the school and my parents. There have also been countless meetings with principals and suspensions on his end, but it never stopped him. Since we've been in high school, I haven't seen him as much, which is a relief, but the times I do are always terrible. When I found out that he was my mom's teacher's assistant, I was obviously very hurt and confused. I asked her why she would want to spend extra time with someone who's made my life so terrible. My mom said that she had him in one of her classes and that he's not a bad kid. He's just had a really terrible home life that she can't tell me about that makes him act out. For the record, my mom's always had a soft spot for kids who come from bad homes. I reminded her of all the things he used to do to me, and she says she understands, but he really needs help right now. I told her I get that, but why does it have to be you? We have a huge school full of teachers and staff who can mentor him. Why does it have to be you? She then told me to stop being selfish and entitled, and some kids have it harder than I can imagine, and she's trying to help. I was honest with her and told her if she continued to have him as her aide, she's dead to me. She was choosing him over me, and she would no longer be my mom. I also told her that I would no longer talk to her the minute I turned 18, and I was moving out and she would never hear from me again. She then rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic and entitled, and the world isn't all about me. After a couple of days of ignoring her, I was grounded. It didn't change my mind, and my dad tried to force me to talk to my mom. I still refused, so they pretty much took everything away from me one by one for the past few weeks. I no longer have my car, my computer, my guitar, and most recently while I was gone, my art supplies, which I've been focusing on since I have nothing else. I basically come home from school and go straight to my room, and I'm not allowed out except dinner. I'm grounded until I start talking to her again. They don't realize that this is just strengthening my resolve. I'm gonna sit in this empty room every day silently until I'm 18, and they'll never see me again. My mom keeps coming in crying, begging me to talk to her, which does make me feel kind of bad, but she still won't remove Dave as her aide. Am I taking this too far? Am I really entitled for wanting my mom to not have anything to do with the person who tormented me for years? I just feel so betrayed, so am I the a-hole for doing this to my mom? You know what guys, I honestly would feel betrayed as well if I were in OP's shoes. Like, how dare you help the person who's tormented me for years, mom? Like, whose side are you on? But yeah, I don't think OP is in any way the a-hole in this situation, and it's super unfair the way the parents have treated OP by grounding them and taking everything away. Like, I don't know who's worse in this situation actually, the bully themselves who tormented OP, or the parents who are basically bullying OP into submission. OP does come back with an update though, which I think you guys will enjoy. It says, so to everyone who said my mom's sleeping with Dave, you are right. I'm just kidding, you guys are all weirdos. A lot has actually happened since last week, and while nothing's really fixed, I think things are going in the right direction. On Friday, I got called out of class to the guidance counselor because I wanted to change tracks from going to college to trades. When I got there, my mom and the assistant principal were there as well. The counselor asked me to sit down and said that me changing tracks from college to trades was a big decision, and she wanted to sit down with my mom and me to figure out if this was really the best for my future. She first asked me if I would fully explain why I wanted to switch. I explained the whole situation from my perspective and how I was being punished. I said that if this is how I was going to be treated from now on, I wanted to become independent as soon as possible, and going to college would have me relying on my parents for longer than I would like. She then asked my mom if she had anything she would like to add. My mom tried to downplay the whole situation at first, and made it look like I was being stubborn and disrespectful. But the counselor asked her more questions, and it became pretty clear that my side was the truth. After this, the assistant principal stepped in and said a teacher's aide was not worth all of this turmoil, and that Dave would be switched with another teacher. I was then asked if this would help me start working things out with my mom. She then asked my mom if she was willing to apologize for anything that happened. My mom gave a half-hearted apology, where she said things had gone overboard and she had never meant to hurt me so much. When I got home, all my stuff was returned to me. I started talking to my mom again. I just kind of felt that there wasn't a point in ignoring her anymore. But I'll answer if she asks me a question. A lot of my anger's gone, and I just see her as a person who happens to live in my house. We haven't scheduled our first counseling session yet, but I don't see it changing much anyway. The damage is done, so I don't see myself changing my mind. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an I don't work here lady episode, where a Karen demands OP serve her because she's Asian. It's such a wild story, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.